The people have spoken, and the people would like to see a video about target stands. Actually, that's a lie. I just had a shitload of footage, so that's what we're doing today. Today, we're going to be talking about the absolute bedrock of range time, which of course, target stands. I'm going to be talking about some design considerations and the fabrication of some target stands that I made for myself, how to prevent target stands from getting shot the fuck up in the first place, and then how to fix them if they do, and then also gongs. A lot of numbers. Just fucking watch it. Don't click through. Don't be a dick. Just fucking watch it all the way through. Right off the bat, not everybody needs their own target stands. If you shoot at an indoor range or if you shoot at an outdoor range that has a permanent target stand set up on the berm, then you probably don't need to fabricate your own target stands. You can shoot on lane 2 or 5 or 8. The world is your oyster. Enjoy the illusion of freedom. There are several situations in which you'd need your own target stand though. For instance, if you host USPSA or IDPA matches, if you're Scrooge McDuck and you've got your own private range, or if you shoot on public land, like BLM land, something along those lines, and you'll need your own target stand. I mean, let's be honest though, if you're shooting on public land, it's a 50-50 chance that your target is either a tree, some sort of cacti, weird shaped rock, street sign, old burned out car, 50-gallon oil drum, high voltage power line. It's probably what you're shooting. BLM land is basically the set of the next Mad Max movie. We go in, we kill. So right off the bat, I pretty much knew exactly what I wanted to make. Number one, and above all else, I wanted it to nest while I carry it around so that I could carry a handful of them downrange at the same time without them being too awkward or bulky. Number two, needed to be inexpensive, which is a given. I'm not making the shit out of diamonds or powdered rhino horn. It's gonna be relatively inexpensive. Number three, it needs to hold 2 1x2s for paper, and it needed to hold 1 2x4 for steel. I knew I didn't want to make it out of PVC because that shit gets blown apart if you even sneeze on it. Just leave PVC for potato cannons. Don't make target stands out of it. And I knew I didn't want to make it out of 2x4s because that's a little too bulky for what I was going for. So this is the design I went with. It's pretty simple. It's a bent V with a crossbar, all made out of hot rolled with 2 tubes for paper, 1 tube for steel. Yeah. And like any good metalworking project, it's got a solid 20 minutes of bandsaw time. For this project, I used 5/8 inch hot rolled for the frame. Did this for 2 reasons. Number one, it is less expensive than rebar, surprisingly enough. I have no idea why. And number two, it actually welds a lot better. Rebar can tend to get pretty brittle once you weld it. So just bend it into a V, pretty simple. I used a Swag off-road 20-ton press brake, which can bend up to 5/8. One little caveat though, you're not supposed to bend round bar because the contact patch is so small that you will actually bend the fuck out of the finger, which is exactly what I did. I kind of permanently fucked up the finger. So, my bad. Honestly, the bending was the most complicated part of that whole process. Other than that, you just slide a crossbar in, space the tubes out properly, and weld the whole thing up. Ta-da! It was super simple. Look at those mediocre welds. You know the best way to hide a mediocre weld? Under some high temp grill paint. So I painted these. I would not suggest painting your steel target stands unless you are 100% positive that nobody is ever going to shoot them, for a couple reasons. Number one, if somebody shoots them and you ever have to repair it, then you got to grind all that paint off, and it's a giant pain in the ass. And number two, if they're going at an indoor range, they're not really going to come into contact with water. Paint, you got 2 purposes for paint. Number one, it's aesthetic. Number two, rust prevention. Actually, you'd flip that. Number one, rust prevention. Number two, aesthetic. That's it. So if it's in an indoor range, you're never going to come in contact with water. You don't really need the rust prevention. And who gives a shit about aesthetics? If you're using it in an outdoor range, rust prevention is helpful, but if you ever tag it, it's going to be a pain in the ass to grind the paint off to re-weld. But the other thing is that if you're shooting steel targets, all the spall and splatter coming down from that steel target is going to blow the paint off anyway. So just don't even fuck with it. It's an extra step. If you want to do it, fine, you don't need to. Turns out that the straps that bundle the furring strips together is made out of fucking Kevlar. So just use a machete. Also, these cuts do not even need to be remotely accurate. It's just roughly ballpark of what height you want it to be. All right, let's stop beating around the bush. It's time to talk about the size of my wood. Tube. Both. So dimensional lumber has a nominal dimension, like 2x4, for instance. You would think that the 2x4 is actually 2 inches by 4 inches, when in reality, 2x4 is the green lumber dimension as it comes off of a sawmill before it's planed or dried or anything else. And like many unfortunate chaps, it suffers from significant shrinkage. Don't we all? Anyway, a 2x4 ends up more along the lines of 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Same thing with the furring strips. Furring strips are supposed to be 1x2s. End up more along the lines of like 5/8 by 1.3 inches, something like that. Steel tubing, on the other hand, is measured by the outside dimension, and that outside dimension is accurate. What varies is the wall thickness. So you can pick whatever wall thickness you want to. And the varying of the wall thickness determines how much room you have in there for your wood. Science. Dick joke science. So some people like to play the wall thickness game to get the ID of the tube as close as possible to the OD of the stick. They like it in there tight, real tight. I go the other way, like a slappy, super slappy. Talking about this action. So this action right here. Wiggle it around. Do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, if there's a little bit of play in there, then if any errant anything happens, there's a little dent in the tube, you can still get the stick out. Where if it's super tight in there and you get a dent, you might be fucked. You might not be able to get it back out. Number two is that if for some reason the bay that you're shooting on is sloped, not necessarily with the horizon, so you have like an off-camber bay, you can put the target stand flat on the ground, which is not level with the horizon, and then you can pivot the sticks up to be perpendicular to the horizon. Whereas if it was super tight and you didn't have any play in there, then your sticks would just be perpendicular to the base. So I like that little bit of play to be able to wiggle it around. No, you get it. You get it. I've talked a lot about how I want my target stands to be light and portable, but at the same time, the base has to be big enough and heavy enough to actually keep the target up in the first place. The two big enemies of targets getting knocked over are wind blowing on large paper targets and steel targets getting shot. As you can see, this target barely moves when getting shot with some 124s. If you choose to shoot some 10-inch plates with a 12 gauge, on the other hand, you're probably going to knock it over. The next thing we have to check for is wind resistance. Booyah. So once I built my own target stands, I got some requests to fix target stands for a local club that I shoot at. Because their stands got shot the fuck up. 99% of the times they get shot up, it's because of a shoot-through. A lot of times when you're planning out stage design, you're looking for shoot-throughs from one paper onto another. A lot of people don't necessarily take into consideration shoot-throughs, paper going through to hit a target stand. And who's looking out for the lowly target stand? Nobody. And when you shoot a tube on a target stand, you really put it out of commission. So that tube is going to pinch that stick off tight in there. So after the match is over, you're basically going to have to break that stick off because you're generally not going to be able to pull it out. And you got to do that because you got to store the target stand, so you can't store it with a stick in there. So you got to snap the fucking thing off. Then it's completely out of commission until you can fix that dent. Also, if you shoot the bottom of the target stand where the tube meets the frame, you can actually crack a weld and just blow the tube right off the frame. So that's another thing to look out for. All right, so rather than just fix these target stands and have some asshole shoot it again, I decided to fix it and then reinforce it with some angle that I had pulled off from another project. So it's this angle I stripped the paint and rust off of, a punch that I turned down on a lathe for no goddamn reason, you'll see in a minute. 2-pound ball peen, which I use for no goddamn reason, you'll see in a minute. Some various drill bits for no goddamn reason, you'll see in a minute. Angle grinder, and then this sweet ass little paint stripping pad, which is actually my favorite part of the entire goddamn project. All right, if you just have dents towards the top of the tube like this, super easy to do. All you do, bandsaw, hacksaw, zip disc, whatever you want to, cut the top portion off, strip the paint, cut another portion of a tube, slap it back on there, re-weld. Easy peasy. That's the simplest way to do it. The ones that had a dent a little further down the tube that I couldn't get to with the bandsaw, I had a brilliant idea. I was going to drill out from the back of the tube. So here's the front of the tube with a dent in it, and I'm going to drill a hole in the back of the tube that lines up with the center of that dent, and then I was going to insert that punch and then just hammer the dent flat. Well, fucking spoiler alert, that shit did not work. All I did was destroy a couple bits because I got a little aggressive with a couple pilot point bits and fucking snapped them, and then wailed on it and did nothing but mushroom out that punch that I made. It did absolutely nothing. So that was a massive waste of time. So in order to fix it, I took a zip disc, cut the tube off at the frame, had to grind it down, had to grind all the paint off, and then had to re-weld it. The one cool part about this whole thing was look how fucking well that little paint stripping pad pulls paint and rust off. That is fucking beautiful. Look at that. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Bandsaw time. So now that everything's prepped, it's just time to weld. Super simple. Any repair on the frame, do that, weld the tubes back up, and then weld those little angle irons on the front. Oh yeah, mediocre welds yet again. There were a couple of them that I had to significantly rebuild. In one I built from the ground up, also in this HPattern, and I decided to add a little more. So instead of just doing the angle iron guard in the front, I did an angle iron guard on the front that was also set on a larger piece of angle iron that went up the back. So it actually protected front and back on that. These are HPattern, and I know I talked about how I wanted mine to nest earlier in that V pattern. There's nothing wrong with HPattern. They nest really well on a little cart that we push them around on. They're just not particularly convenient to carry. So with the V pattern ones that I made, I'm going to be taking those out of the car and carrying them down the range. So I want to be able to carry several at once. With these H patterns, since we're wheeling a cart onto the range anyway, they nest really well on the cart itself. So it just kind of depends what you're trying to do. Okay, we're going to do a quick 2 seconds on gongs. So gongs are cool specifically for rifles. I guess you could use it for anything. I wouldn't use it anything outside the rifle. And I like it for a couple reasons. One, it's a little bit of give to it when you shoot it with something pretty stout. And two, it gives you that visual feedback. So gongs, generally, if you're shooting something with rifles, you're gonna have it 100 yards plus. So you've got it way out there and you want some indication that you actually hit the target. So if you got something 200 yards away, it helps if it moves whenever you hit it. I bought this whole setup like 10 years ago in Texas. It's super simple. You got 5 bars, 2 connectors, 1 strap, 1 plate. And by far the most important part is whatever you use to hang it. Fuck a cable, fuck any sort of chain, including logging chain or anything else you think it's super strong. Don't even dick with it. Go straight to some sort of strap. So I've used wide flat toe straps before. This I think is some sort of like conveyor belt material. And I've seen people use tires or like fire hoses. All of those are great options. You can just shoot it a million times and it's not going to fuck it up. This one, as you can see, stopped some bird shot. And the only significant damage I ever had is because I tagged a crossbar with a slug. Oops. So yeah, gongs, they're awesome. You might have caught this little guy. I wouldn't worry about that little guy. If you're wondering, yes, this is 3/8 inch AR 500. I think it's a 10-inch plate. And I tagged it at about 95 yards with 130 grain nozzler partition out of a 270 Weatherby. Over 72 grains of reloader 22. Things move like 3,200 feet per second. I did not expect it to drill a hole straight through it at fucking all, and it did. I knew it was gonna crater it, which was okay because this one was already a little bit pitted, but it fucking burned a hole straight through that bitch. Did not expect it. If you have a second, which I know you do because you're on fucking YouTube right now, make sure to like and subscribe and click that little bell notification to know when new videos come out. I know you get asked for it a lot, but it's actually super helpful. Keeps me motivated to keep on making content. Also drop a comment if there's anything in particular you want to see.